This is an ultimate global podcast. Hello, and welcome to our Daily Dose podcast, covering all about day-to-day global affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kora and George Mavros from Sydney.
Hello, good evening to everyone who is joining us from the beautiful city of Sydney. In today's Daily Dose podcast, we are touch basing upon this very interesting topic of Afghanistan 1 month on, as we discuss upon this theme of foreign policy and diplomacy. And for today's Daily Dose, we are collaborating with the Afghan Women on the Move. And so you can also understand the guest, who is the founder and director of Afghan Women on the Move and has been doing an incredible job for the empowerment of women in Afghanistan and also the Afghan diaspora around the world. So we have got Maryam, Popal, Zahid again with us, and we have got the co-founder of UGP, George Mavros, with us. Welcome to this episode, George and Maryam.
Thank you, Sarah, for the invite, and hello, George, and hello, friends that are watching us.
Hi, Maryam. I am delighted to be here with you today. After our brief chat the other week, I have been looking forward to this for ever since. So I'm really looking forward to talking with you further today. And good afternoon to you, Sarah. Great job as always.
So to begin off with this discussion, George and Maryam, let's start with this recent development, which has been happening in Afghanistan with respect to the government formation in Afghanistan. The kinds of news that we have been getting in terms of the inequalities which are existing in those government. A lot of countries have already expressed that the government it's a government which has excluded the women from the government. The European Union has also commented on this fact that you cannot have a government stating in front of the media that it is an inclusive government where we want to treat everyone equally, but we come out as a government where we are not even having any woman in that government. And in fact, United Nations has mentioned that the Prime Minister who has taken over is definitely and the Interior Minister are definitely not the ones who should be taking over that position, because they are classified. The Interior Minister is in fact classified as one of the founders of the Haqqani network, which is classified as a terrorist group by Washington. Not only this, Pramila Patten, who is the head of UN Women's Agency, has called on that the women's political participation is definitely a fundamental prerequisite for gender equality and genuine democracy. And by excluding women from the machinery of the Taliban government formed in Afghanistan is definitely sending a wrong signals about the fact that they are forming an inclusive, strong, and prosperous society. To start off with the conversation, I'll pass it on to Maryam to talk a bit about that.
Thank you, Sarah. And yes, and it is unfortunate to see what has been unfolding since Taliban has taken over and what promises they have kind of set in their social media written messages, but not so far. There's no action to bring that inclusive government as they have previously indicated it, and at the moment and it's going to be for some time that Afghan women has every right to protest against Taliban if they don't accept women and all part of the government, and if they don't want or if they don't include us, then I guess we will keep fighting, and they will keep facing us.
Absolutely. I think for some reason we lost George in between, maybe because of his internet connection. Looking forward to seeing him again, because I had some questions for George as well. Mm-hmm. But the kind of developments which have been happening in in the Afghanistan have been quite distressing, not only in terms of the political formation, but also the fact that this government is again showing us signs of how it was in 1996 by bringing in those extremist policies in terms of, still the women are not feeling safe in terms of going out. And also, yesterday you had posted about this fact that how the woman should dress in a colorful attire and not move towards a burqa, as is considered to be a traditional attire by the Taliban, which is actually not correct, isn't it?
Well, I believe that women should given opportunity and every right to choose to what they want to wear. So if they want to wear burqa, they will wear burqa. If they don't want to wear burqa, they don't. But this burqa or this black burqa or blue burqa in Afghanistan has been forced. So that's why we are objecting. If we given the choice of not to dress the way we want, some can go without scarf, some can go with a scarf, some can go with burqa, then that will indicate that we have a choice. But if they put us, first they kind of exclude us from the government, and then they exclude us from higher studies, and then they kind of makes us invisible behind those blue and black curtains, that's where we are not going to accept that. So what our Taliban are trying to do, their ideology is to they are trying to force on women, especially women and young boys and girls. So not just Afghan women at the moment are scared and confused in Afghanistan to what future holds for them, but also from what I know and very much connected with on the ground with Afghans there, that even the boys and girls that were born 20 years ago, they're also scared. They're also worried. They're also traumatized by the fact that what is there for them in the future, for their future in Afghanistan. At the moment, the TVs, there are no channels on the televisions. There is no hope that they can continue their studies and choose what they want to study. There are not much platforms available for them if they go outside of that structural kind of approach that Taliban has for the civilians or the people of Afghanistan. So that's how things are becoming so complicated. And someone said to me yesterday that if the bombing or the suicides don't kill them, the depression, anxiety, and this hopelessness will definitely will kill them. And that is something that I'm very worried about.
Absolutely. Just to bring George into the conversation, what I was talking to Maryam was that when the Taliban was in power 2 decades ago, women had to cover themselves from head to toe. And those who were breaking the rules suffered humanitarian crisis and public beatings in terms of their religious, police, which was controlled by Taliban. And again, we are seeing the same kind of regime stressing upon similar kind of restrictions, though they are portraying themselves as a different regime. What do you have to comment on this, George?
Well, I remember when we talked about this about a month ago, and we decided that we would run the show today because this would be 1 month on. And I said at the time, there's a whole lot of talk coming out of the Taliban, but we have to wait and see what the actions are by comparison to what they're saying. I apologise for dropping out because according to Optus, that did not occur, and I have a perfect NBN service here. So you think I dropped out, I think I dropped out, but we're in some different world because Optus says that doesn't happen. Hopefully tomorrow they'll believe me that it does. Actually, Sarab, I might send them a copy of the show. Coming back to the question at hand. I read something yesterday or today leading up to talking with Maryam, and it said that one of the Taliban leaders said that they are not suppressing women. They are not going backwards. They're just merely going back to what their culture was before they've had 20 years of foreign interference, which sort of says that they are suppressing women. They have gone backwards, but not according to the way they see it. a month ago, we were watching some dude on the TV telling us that they were going to respect women. They wanted the education. They wanted women to do this. And yet women have moved out of suits and into burqas within a month. You're still allowed to go and study, I see, Maryam, but now there's a curtain between male and female. You can still go and pray, but you're to go in the morning if you're a woman, and the men can go the rest of the day. This doesn't really seem to me like, no, it's all good, nothing to see, move along. We've changed. We've worked out what we're doing. There's a whole lot of questions. I would imagine, Maryam, even if we didn't have COVID at the moment, the last place you would want to be going to, not from your heart, but from common sense right now, would be back to Afghanistan, because you would be fearful. Somebody that's been as forthright as you have, somebody's been as powerful to get women to understand they've got rights and that, you couldn't possibly think that you would do women a service by going back there at the moment, because I don't think we'd speak to you again. I honestly don't think we'd speak to you again. But the Taliban would have a good answer for that. One of the problems that we've got is, how has the West handled it, and how is the West going to handle it?
There are so many actors in Afghanistan from all over the world, to be honest. So we just at the moment don't know who are our friends and who are our enemies. And that's the real problem. And that's the foundation of all these crises that are keep unfolding and keep changing. And Afghanistan is taking different, approach to tackle these issues, and the governments are changing. And as I said in my previous interview with you, Sarah, that 20 years ago when Taliban was out and I left Afghanistan, I was like, that was nightmare. And I never thought that 20 or 22 years later, we will see the Taliban again. And that's why this shock still hasn't kind of really sinked in me to kind of go and scream even louder. But what I can understand now, and what I have comprehend through my studies and experiences, and the more exposure we have to conversation and people and other perspective on this matter, that there are so many hands involved in Afghanistan, that Afghanistan politics has become so complicated, and now the religious perspectives are very much political, become very political, and they have lost the essence of the religion. If they wanted to bring that peace from religion, if they call the religion that this is we wanted to do this particular way of life religiously. For example, they have put these curtains between in the class between boys and girls. I'm just thinking, where's the common sense? The boys and girls enter from one door. The boys and girls will leave on the street, still will see each other. The boys and girls will be seeing each other in the shops, and only in the class. What does will do for them, and it will only put more attention to why they are segregated, like in a class between a curtain. So these are very much staged kind of way of doing things.
But Maryam, don't you think that is in actual fact their intention, to say, look, we're letting them go in there together, but by the mere act of what they're doing, you are automatically saying to the women, you are segregated from the men. It is a psychological statement to the women. This is no different to if you're black in the 50s or the 40s, whenever it was, you sit in the back of the bus. Yep, they're on the same bus as whites in America, but you sit at the back because you're black. You sit over there because you're a woman, right? If anybody thinks that this is anything else other than the first strike of psychological warfare on women again, I'm sorry, they're living in a different world, because that's
and I agree.
It is one of these passive aggressive approaches. Maryam, come into school, but get over there because you're a woman.
Yeah. I don't think women can tolerate this for a very long time. Maybe for the next couple of months or so, they will adjusting to at least enter back to workforce and schools and universities. There will be. I never wish any more war in Afghanistan. More than anything, we want peace in Afghanistan. But at the same time, as I said at the beginning of this talk, that we have all the rights to protest against Taliban ideology when they are trying to force it, whether they are doing it through psychological aspects or emotional or social, physical, whatever forces they are using. They are just trying to use their power to control us. And that is not acceptable. When they are trying to control things, people of Afghanistan, women of Afghanistan are not the same as they were being experienced 24 years ago when they were forced in power, Taliban. So they are waiting for some backlash from within the people of Afghanistan if the international communities don't do anything. But I will also encourage everybody and international communities, friends, that they keep an eye on Afghanistan, don't leave Afghanistan alone, and we'll keep conversating about what needs to be done and how to keep them motivated and hopeful, because at the moment Afghanistan facing another crisis of poverty and it's so bad at the moment. The situation has gone from bad to worse.
Maryam, just to continue with where you just left, I want to bring this conversation at the Ultimate Global podcast with some key facts and perspectives. That's what we always say in this podcast. And let's bring in some key facts, which really show the miserable situation of Afghanistan at the moment. Now, if you look at the UNICEF report, which was recently published 3 days or 4 days back, and which I was reading, which says that Afghanistan has got one of the world's highest rates of undernourished children under the age of 5, which is 35%. Number one. Number two, the polio cases in Afghanistan are still there. Afghanistan is, in fact, one of the only 2 countries other than Pakistan to have cases of polio. Last year in Afghanistan, there were 56 cases of polio recorded. And another big thing for the children there is most of the children are not at all safe. The UNICEF report, in fact, pointed out that around 1 million children in Afghanistan are in clear danger. And most of the children, are growing up in an environment which has the, trauma of a war, which has just ended, or I don't know whether it has ended or entered into the second phase. That's what we call. But in the first half of 2021, and this is a very critical figure, in the first half of 2021 in Afghanistan, more than 552 children have been killed and 1,400 have been injured. And which means that those many families have lost their closed ones in Afghanistan. And these are the figures, which we need to look at moving forward. If Afghanistan really needs to come out of this misery of drought, undernourishment, bringing their children out of poverty, bringing their country out of poverty in the coming years, isn't it, George?
Yeah, and then when you add into that Afghanistan's assets and finances and all of that are external of the country and they've been frozen, I'm still very critical and very skeptical about how much money left with the government that left for the benefit of the people. And if anybody didn't pick up, that was said sarcastically. So you've got a country that's dealing with all that it's been dealing with the wars, the battles. It's been ravished by COVID, as many other countries have. You've got the power base has now changed, and the Taliban are back in place. You've got the Western alliance, I will refer to, which is Britain, Australia, US, etc., have left and have said we shouldn't be here anymore, blah, blah, blah. So one would not expect that they're going to easily go back in, having just left. So the finances are frozen. All of this other stuff's going on. What my concern is, Maryam, where do you go? What do you do to take the thing forward if you are in Afghanistan and you are a woman or a male that wants to support women's rights and the alternate idea to the Taliban? Because you and I and 55,000 of our mates could start a walk in Afghanistan, and if the Taliban start attacking us, do you honestly think that the US is coming back in? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So what have we actually said to the people of Afghanistan? What is the message that the person in Afghanistan's got? You're on your own. Oh no! We've got the Russians and the Chinese, and they've already acknowledged that they're acknowledging the Taliban. Okay, so they acknowledge them, and you think they're going to go in and save you? Don't think so.
What has happened, right? What has been done is it's very difficult for me to kind of go back and wish that things would not happen, or what's happening cannot do much about it. But what can I really convey or try to do for Afghan people and people that are on the ground is not to give up on education. Education is the key for them to understand their basic human rights. And if they don't ask the right for themselves, no matter how many countries comes and goes in Afghanistan, no matter how much money will be given to Afghanistan, if they don't want to look at their immediate short and long-term benefits and make a stable life and future for them and for their children, boys and girls, don't have this gender equality and embedded in their way of life, things will never change for my people, including my own families that are there. Look at, for example, if I say it in a very simple language here, when people that got displaced, women are not just displaced, men are suffering, poor men are suffering all the same. Children are suffering, families suffering the same. One, I've been just delivered some first aid help in Afghanistan last week, thanks to our donors from Australia. And one of them actually said the conversation that I had with my contacts there that wish things were different. But then the conversation kind of was in a sense that only if he knew that if the children were educated, if he were educated, they might even get a chance to get out now, because only educated people got out of Afghanistan. So until we don't have this self-respect that needs to be kind of set and really implemented and given themselves the permission to say that this is my right, whether I wanted to wear a scarf or don't wear a scarf, whether I wanted to be part of government, I don't want to be part of government, but I must given a choice. At the moment, there is no choice in Afghanistan. And by one size to fits all, no one can last forever. Even Taliban, they might go for another couple of months or years, and then what? Yeah, so I won't rely on foreign powers and forces to always keep saving Afghanistan. We saw the most powerful country that we see, America at the moment, couldn't do much. They came to get rid of Taliban number one, and they left us giving us Taliban number two. So it's not a blaming game, but look at it. Nobody, until you don't get up for your own rights, nothing can be changed. Even Taliban now says, look, the way they talk on their social media and their interviews, that we want ourselves to be independent, blah, 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 but still they need the help of donors. You can't just, get the donation and eat, and then you don't spend it on the education of your men and women. If it was me, I would have encouraged international alliance to give help, give donation to the people of Afghanistan to make sure it's the poor people gets fed and educated, but not to make the government powerful with more, things that they just wanted for themselves and exclude women and children of Afghanistan.
So on the basis that the women will eventually stand up for themselves, how do you see that working? Because it seems to me, and this is coming straight from the top of my head, this is not a pre-written script, so if I get this wrong I will apologise to people, but it seems to me that when the Americans and the Australian Armed Forces pulled out, the one thing that I did agree with Biden on pretty all the way down the line was when he said the Afghan government and the Afghan military didn't do anything. Why should we be losing our lives of our soldiers if they won't fight for themselves? So if the military collapsed as it did, as quickly as it did, for whatever the reason, why would women and the average family in Afghanistan have courage to go out and march in the middle of Kabul? Because who's going to be protecting them?
Yeah, there's two things here, George. One, what Biden said, Biden was not part of that decision making 20 years ago when America went there. So he just talks from how to buy probably votes at the moment and trying to save more money and get things a little bit of attention on himself. They had no post withdrawal plans for Afghanistan. You can't go in Afghanistan and stamp everything, the success of women and empowerment on yourself, but things that you cannot control, then you say, why do I have to do it? So he was absolutely wrong to, I'm not a politician, I'm not a philosopher, but I can, from just a common person, from my perspective and the people that I know of and worked with, America left us with whatever political agenda they had, and as you saw on their interviews that they said they had no self-interest in Afghanistan, so they got what they want and they left. In terms of Afghan women, that sometimes difficult times needs difficult measures. So at the moment, bravery and activism needs a lot of courage. Sometimes for the sake of your people, the sake of your children, when you have experienced life, you don't want your children to live in dark ages. I'll give you guys a very simple example here. When I came for 22 years ago in Australia, I came from a time of Taliban when at that time I left in Afghanistan, I was born in Afghanistan and I've grown up in Afghanistan. So I lived in a country where I had no exposure outside of the world, outside of Afghanistan. There was no internet, there was nothing. So all I knew was Afghanistan and then the extreme measures of Taliban because everybody else was scared, I was scared too. When my mom was scared, I was scared too because I was a very young girl. And then I came to Australia. I was very lucky to come to Australia and I said, wow, things are much different and beautiful and people can live this way as well. But the Maryam that was born 20 years ago, she's been exposed to outside world. Social media had a huge impact on the lives of people that live on the other side of the world. They already seen what women are doing and what their rights are, and they can read, they can write, everything. So for them, it's going to be extremely difficult to go back to that 20 years ago and be me that I was there. So that's why they will give themselves a right and they will take the risk to protest against that the way of life that Taliban wants women to be not to be included in a civil society, and we will support them. I can't go Afghanistan because they will make a very bad worst case scenario out of me that will scare a lot of women. So for that case, I'm not going. But if I knew that I could go and help on the street marching with women without Taliban doing any extreme stuff, I would have gone. Honestly, I would have gone. But because some of them, most of Talibans are quite extreme, and they just, as I said, they will make an extreme example of some situation that Taliban, the only thing they have is that power of that the gun and the look that scares people. Psychologically, they have
fear and force. Fear
they
and
have
force.
nothing else. They can't sit with you and talk. Like, tell me how many of them will. I want to see a Taliban woman to come and sit down and talk to me, right? Who I'm going to talk to, and the men will just say, "Well, you're not. I don't want to talk to you." So see that psychological game that they are playing with us. And as I said, we will take risks, and I salute and I encourage Afghan women in Afghanistan to be safe, but at the same time not to give up. And we will do anything from our end here, whether it's financially, emotionally, psychologically, whatever we can, we will support them and we will stand with Afghan women.
And also, Maryam, I was reading about this interesting thing. In fact, watching a documentary after the 9/11 celebration or marking of the day that was going on across the world, where they were talking about this fact that what could have been the better end result of 9/11? Was it the beginning of the war or actually investigating into that incident? A lot of the people criticize that instead of investigating into the incident, the governments decided to go for the war, which was not at all required at that time. And so, there are some doubts on the intentions of the US government at that time and now. We'll come to that at a later time. But what I wanted to talk about is the future of the children. What is the mistake of a small child who is 1 year old, 2 years old at the moment in Afghanistan, and he or she is, witnessing such an unsafe environment. As I just pointed out to you that around 1 million Afghan children are at a risk of starvation, as pointed out by the UNICEF director. And this is combined with COVID-19, drought, the security concerns around the child. How does this impact the environment around any kind of kids which are growing up in that environment? Because as a kid, what do you want? Or what will the parents want of those particular kids is to provide the best possible education to their kids, to provide them with a safe and friendly environment. And unfortunately, a lot of them are not able to do that. So it's a miserable situation for those parents who want to make their children educated, who want to make a better future for their kids, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. And I can speak from my own experience that when my parents were scared because of when the Taliban were in power, when I was in Afghanistan 25 years ago, I was scared too. And what was my fault? I couldn't even understand that why people were dying. I couldn't understand why my parents couldn't go to work, why we were poor, why we didn't have proper food, why my neighbors were leaving their houses, and I remember at that time where in the whole big town there were few neighbors were left. Everybody else was moved out of country. I couldn't understand, and I can only feel that how scared is the children. As I said, they are very smart children of this new 21st century. That, and I'm also watching some media coverage is that children are crying. They say we are scared of Taliban on the streets. Whether Taliban has done directly anything to them or not, but it's the fact that they understand now. And that's sometimes ignorance is bliss. When I was, when you don't know, you just don't know. But when you know you're right, that becomes so difficult to feel that why me? I've spoken to another friend, and he said to me, and sometimes I think that I wish I wasn't even born in Afghanistan. So that much Afghan people, young people are traumatized in Afghanistan. Women and children are the most affected part of the country, part of the society at the moment. I have thousands of women that they just, even the parents say, you leave, that don't worry about us, as long you leave. Because we don't have much anyway. That's from their own words. I'm just copying. I have girls that said, Maryam, we have worked in media, we have worked in art centers, we have done things, we had our own businesses. They had few things that had a very contemporary approach into it. But now they are jobless. They don't have job. They have no future. Taliban clearly said that there's no even women affairs in Afghanistan. There's no Ministry of Women Affairs. There is nothing. So what's going to happen to these people? And even if we say that Afghan people, go and march on the street, will they march? Politically, they may and may not do much about it because, nowadays the social media can, capture everything. But when on the other hand, if there is no platforms for them to go and function and work and earn money, what's going to happen to these people? I have no answers. Unless we collectively, as international communities, as friends, come together, pressurizing the UN and other much powerful platforms that are quite involved politically with Afghanistan to pressurize Taliban government that it has to include women, it has to include minority groups, and it has to have this inclusive government. Otherwise, we will not accept their government. The way that Australian cricket team were kind of said, if they were Taliban said no women can play sports or cricket, that's it. We are not going to welcome. And actually, I was celebrating that, not because that our men were kind of pushed, but this is a time there we all have to stand by each other. Afghan men also stand by Afghan women to say that if you don't give my sister a right, I'm not going to represent my country. This is how you're going to tackle some issues and perceptions.
Absolutely.
Whilst that is very noble, and whilst it is very logical that that's the way it's got to go, the sad thing for me is that also sounds like a whole lot of people losing their life.
Yes.
It sounds, and that is the tragedy. And the funny old thing about all these sorts of things, the ones that lose their life first, it seems as though it's the women and the children. And that doesn't mean that I don't value men's lives. I happen to be a man, but in all these sorts, if you look at Rwanda, if you look at any of the tyrannical approach, the ones that cop it the most first are the kids, who to me are the innocents, and the women who they're just the soft target for these bullies, I can't see how your people can get out of where they are without a heck of a lot of people giving up their lives for it, and that's sad.
Yeah. On one hand, that, and I acknowledge what you say, George, but on the other hand, people are becoming smart, and international community here can play a big role, a very smart approach to tackle this Afghanistan politics and exclude some of our neighboring countries to don't interfere in the politics of Afghanistan. So we kind of find out who's our enemies and who's our friends in that sense. So we know where to go and who to ask for help for. And in that sense, we must for the immediate rescue, for immediate help, women of Afghanistan, those that not want to live in Afghanistan, we must help them to get out just for even some time until things get settled. And on the other hand, we must continue our humanitarian aid in Afghanistan to make sure that the 5 million people that are displaced and more than 500,000 people that are in Kabul, in the parks that are living, don't die out of hunger and diseases. It happens that I am, doing this fundraising that every 2 weeks I send some help in Afghanistan through my channels, and I've heard some terrible stories that again, women and children living in the park, they are living in terrible conditions, and these people, once they had a house, they're in rural areas, places that we go here in Australia for holidays to go near the mountains and places that are beautiful. That was their houses, and they were living very comfortably. And all of a sudden, this chaos.
So how do you actually get the charity and the donations and the whatever to the women and children without it being raided by the others?
There's a lot of, I have a lot of good connections in Afghanistan. The people that I've been doing this charity work for about 5 years now. It's not just for this crisis. I've helped during the COVID. We have done some empowerment projects. We have done a few other projects that we were constantly working in rural areas of Afghanistan and also in Kabul. So still, I have that streamlines. Will we keep going, whether Taliban like it or they don't? But I'm doing it not against Taliban, not against anything. I'm doing it for our people to stay alive, for poor people, not just women, for families to stay alive. I think there is a little bit of humanity in every single person should be in Afghanistan alive, that it's purely humanitarian work. And that will be their loss if they don't let me to continue this.
And also, Maryam, just to point out, yesterday we had this special episode where we touched based upon the key influence of BRICS in the 21st century, because BRICS had their annual conference last year in which all the emerging nations, including Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, and China, they came together. And the two main agendas for that annual meeting, undoubtedly, one was the COVID-19 situation that the countries are facing from, and the second one was the Afghanistan situation. In fact, Russian president also pointed out towards this fact that how the ongoing situation of Afghanistan is a threat to the neighboring countries because it's becoming a source of drug trafficking and terrorism. I somehow feel that these countries they need to come out of their political interests. Some of the countries are still categorizing it into good terrorism and bad terrorism. This terrorism is good for us. This terrorism is bad for us. So they look at it from their political lens and take their decisions and showcase themselves on the large political platforms as if they are really concerned about those issues. When they are not even concerned, when they go back to their countries, they are talking about good terrorism and bad terrorism. So I'm not naming any countries. We all know about those countries who categorize into good and bad terrorism. It's just that the notion, the countries, if they really want to help Afghanistan out, they have to come out of that political notion so that
Correct.
they start differentiating between any kinds of terrorism, any kinds of bad people, because terrorism is terrorism at the end of the day, isn't it, Maryam and George?
Yes, and that Afghanistan war has been always political. They just uses religion or religious approaches and interpretation of stuff to kind of justify some of their actions. There's since I have few examples that, to be honest, it's going to take forever for me to tell you guys. But from young age, when Russia came to our country, I was there. There was a scene that I watched on TV, which I can't recall the name of everybody, but I'll definitely share it and then next talk or something. That from that, I was probably 7 or 8. I felt that they were tricking these vulnerable people to do what they wanted to, kind of why they were in Afghanistan and why they wanted to do certain stuff. So I if I say how big the countries that try to interfere in Afghanistan, but because of their interference, because of their greed, because of their, the people are dying. Mothers are losing their children, lovers losing their loved ones, the husband lose their wives lose their husbands, and nobody will take everything with them to the grave. All of us will die, just us. So I don't know why so much greed in the country, in this world. And look at the COVID-19. It has been a good example for us, some of us or most of us, to see at the end of the day at what do we want, what do we really want.
Before George, you take over, just want to tell you about this important question, and want to raise this question with you, that how these backdoor conversations involve more of the political notions instead of valuing the human lives around the world. European Union, BRICS, they have been talking over the years how they can help out Afghanistan and how their plan is to revive the humanitarian crisis. But again, when it comes to the real action, it doesn't seem to occur. And probably some kind of political notions seem to coming in between. Do you think that we need to come out of that if we really need to help countries suffering from this kind of crisis? Not only Afghanistan, there are so many similar issues in the neighboring countries as well, in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, where we are having different kind of conflicts related to terrorism, related to hunger, poverty. And to solve those issues, you need to come in solidarity, not only on the global forums by speaking about those issues, but also implementing it by neglecting any kind of political notions coming in between your pathway. Isn't it, George?
The sad thing is, Sarab, and I don't want to sound like I've given up and I'm just a cynical old guy. I'm not. I'm a very positive person. And one of my sayings is, every grey cloud, you've got to find the silver lining. So, but there is also reality. There is also reality. If you have a look at Afghanistan, if you have a look at Kuwait, if you have a look at Iran, Iraq, any of those countries, if you have a look at, then let's go to some of the African nations where women and children have been slaughtered by the thousands, not the hundreds, the thousands. It's a sad old story, but go and have a look and see where the United Nations, and anybody else for that matter, is as keen to run in to save some poor person if their country doesn't have something of value, versus, hang on a second, coincidentally, Kuwait has oil and the West wants the oil. Oh, we've got to help them and save them. So the notion that you're going to remove politics is wonderful, but it's not reality. Even in the UN, even in the various discussions that we've gone through, right? There have been occasions when the UN doesn't turn a blind eye to what Russia might have done and to that plane going down, doesn't turn a blind eye to, remember that weapons of mass destruction that miraculously couldn't be found? Now, nobody at the UN called the president in, or America in, and said, listen, guys, you need to stump up, you need to accept this. Why? Well, because they're a bloody big chunk of the UN and we ain't going to bite the hand that feeds us. So the problem that you, me, Maryam, the average person on the street has is that we are quite often happy to be politically agnostic. The problem is, if I'm a Labor politician in Australia, the first thing I do is see who came up with the idea before I decide whether it's a good or bad idea. Now, funny enough, if I'm a Liberal politician, I'm just using Australia, you could go to any country. If I'm a Liberal politician in this country, I look at who came up with the idea before I decide whether it's a good or a bad idea. When you get to people like Maryam, when you get to people like Mother Teresa, when you get to people like what Mandela did, or Martin Luther King, and there's many, many others we could all rattle off, they didn't care what your political party was. They didn't care about that. What they said was, you know what, this is wrong. Now, we as a world, we have to get more people to understand those silly little words that are in songs. John Farnham has a song and it says, you're the voice, try and understand it. How long can we look at each other down the barrel of a gun? Now, somebody goes dancing to that every day. Well, they probably don't at the moment because they're not allowed to, thanks COVID. But there's many people that sing that song and, oh, that's a great song. When I first heard that song, that resonated with me so much. We're all someone's daughter. We're all someone's son. How long can we look at each other down the barrel of a gun? Now, until people really, really listen to those words in those funny old songs, and many are saying, we can try and we can work, but there's a lot of us that are going to work very hard because a few of them in power can't be trusted. I cannot put my hand on my heart and say what my Prime Minister tells me I can trust 100%, because I don't know what agenda he's running. I can't put my hand on my heart and say I can trust what the opposition leaders say, because the first thing I say is, well, they're in opposition, so there you go. And this is the same in England, it's the same in America, it's the same. And don't think it's just Western world. You know, communism, we're all equal. Well, I tell you what, for a country where everyone's equal, that Putin seems to have got a few bob in his pocket, hasn't he? So it really, you know, I think Maryam is right. It's got to come from the ground up. It's got to come from groundswell of people, but not just in Afghanistan. People around the world have got to start to understand. We're the voice. Try and understand it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Before we end today's Daily Dose podcast, I want to, take the final comments from Maryam, because, and also, tell a bit about what Afghan Women on the Move is doing. What an incredible, job Maryam is doing in Australia and spreading this word around the world. So if you have got any questions, the people who are watching Ultimate Global Podcast, if you want to get connected to Maryam and, help her in any of her initiatives, feel free to message on our channels as well, and we will be directing you to Maryam, because she also requires as many volunteers as possible. Before we end today's podcast, would you like to comment a bit about what you are doing through the Afghan Women on the Move, Maryam?
Thank you, Saurabh. I may be the face of Afghan Women on the Move. A lot of people probably know me just from Afghan Women on the Move, but I have an incredible team behind me, including yourselves, guys, that are in contact with me. They keep me going. They keep me, giving me that aspiration and that kick, that not to give up. There were times, especially in the past couple of weeks, that I was really were falling apart, and I never felt this broken and hopeless before. So I give a credit to the numerous of people that are on board. And for Afghan Women on the Move, you guys can have a look at our website, which is www.awtm.com. You can see my team. I have multicultural women and men that are on board. And our operational manager, she's an Australian woman. So I have all friends that you can just name it from all around the world are part of this movement. So I'm grateful for them. Afghan Women on the Move is an advocacy platform. So we are very much focusing on the needs of women at risk and women in particularly, but obviously working with all communities, especially now with the new arrivals. I wear a few hats, so I have a very quite diverse educational and work experience background. So I can I'm becoming all-rounder. Wherever there is a need, I just jump in and gets it done. And I'm doing also a fundraising for Afghanistan for the next couple of months. Every month we will be partnering with one organization that currently we are doing with Bridge Housing Australia. Next month we are doing with UTS University. So every month we are doing a bit of work with every agencies to collect some money, because Afghanistan winter is quite harsh. It will be snowing. People are homeless. We want to make sure that we reach out to as many as possible. So yes, please reach out to me, to Saurabh, to George. We're all connected. Like-minded people are always connected. So please do reach out. And we always welcome help, volunteers, those who want to share their experiences, knowledge with us. We will be more welcoming them more than ever.
Absolutely. And, through conversations, we want to take this collaboration of Ultimate Global Podcast and Afghan Women on the Move to a long run, so that we can also help you out in getting more volunteers and marketing your initiative to as many people around the world as possible. Because it's not only something where we want to just discuss and that's it. We want to also make that conversation valuable by actually inviting people to become a part of this initiative. That's why I always look forward for any collaborations or partnerships. Even George also looks forward for that. And that was the main reason for us, to start this podcast as well, to not only have those collaborations, but creating value out of the conversations that we have, isn't it, George?
Yeah, and Maryam, I'm going to put, which I'm not really, because I know he's not going to disagree with me anyway. So, but I'm going to say I'm going to put Sarab on the spot, because I'm going to invite you here and now that you come back 1 month from now and we talk about Afghanistan 2 months down the track. And Sarab, I think what we should be doing as part of what we're trying to do to help, we should have a monthly. We'll have 3 months down the track, 4 months down the track. We may only be doing a few people at a time, Maryam, but every journey starts with the first step. So if we can do that to help you, I'd like to have an arrangement with you that we have a standing monthly invitation. Let's see what's happening. Let's see if there's something we can talk about, and possibly bring other people in on those meetings if you think that would be beneficial.
Definitely. Thank you, guys. And I'll be more than happy to collaborate.
Thank you so much for watching today's Daily Dose. We hope to see you again, and we hope to see you, Maryam, again in the next month with probably another guest speaker, another woman whom you have inspired in the recent times.
Thank you. Definitely, I will interview. I have 3,000 members just for Afghan Women on the Move, and more than a couple of thousand friends and followers on social media, and we're all connected and very much like-minded. So definitely pass on the message, and we'll show some new faces on the podcast as well from Afghanistan.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, guys. And feel free to share our channels on LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple, iTunes, Spotify. We are everywhere. So please feel free to follow us.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.